My name is Brianna Welch, and the modern theorist I chose was John Hattie. I actually encountered him about a year ago in a TED Talk video, and I was just really interested in his research. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him. He is still around. He was born in New Zealand, and he's married, but you won't find a lot of information about his private life, his family, because he is a pretty private man as he's talking about education. He began his career in 1971 working as a tutor while he was attending the University of Otago in New Zealand. And he's currently in Australia working as the director of the Melbourne Educational Research Institute. His education includes getting his Bachelor in Arts from the University of Otago in 1970. That's also where he received his Diploma of Education a year later and his Master's of Arts in 1974. He went on to get his PhD at the University of Toronto in 1981. And his theory is called visible learning. He wrote a book in 2009 called Visible Learning, and it is basically a monumental research project that charts productivity and the different influences in education and kind of how they affect our students, whether they're positive or negative. It's based on 80 meta-analyses in which 52,000 individual studies were integrated. A meta-analysis is basically a multiple subject study, multiple different fields of research were all pulled together. The way that he achieves his results, it's basically a giant statistical index rather than like a literary work. He bases the positive and negative influences on a measurement of difference. And if you think about it in terms of numbers, 0.2 is small, 0.4 is moderate, and 0.6 or higher would be a strong result, meaning whatever that was something that was very positive. So you can see here I got some of the pictures of what some of the different influences are. You can briefly see those. But about 138 factors ranging from negative 0.61 to positive 2 are in his list. Most fall within the 0.05 to 0.8 range. Some of the examples of things that are the influencers include like teacher clarity, the student-teacher relationship, homework, home life, etc. Some of his major influences clearly include modern theorists and postmodern theorists, such as Jean Piaget, John Dewey, Maria Montessori, Horace Mann, Howard Gardner, and so many more, because, as I said, all of his research is a pool of just tons of other researchers and tons of other theorists. He does not classify himself as a theorist by any means. He likes statistics primarily, and he's even been quoted saying, "I am not a theorist." As of today, his theory now has over 90,000 studies, so it really has grown. Some of the implications today involve constantly evolving evidence. His research constantly changes based on, new teaching opportunities and principles. Teachers can use it by researching ways to effectively teach in their own classroom. He does have a website called Visible Learning Plus, in which teachers can find resources for their classrooms, track data, track how they are effectively communicating to their students based on their academic success. And he does several TED Talks and seminars throughout the year. So he is definitely still playing a major role in our classrooms today. In my own classroom, I imagine that I will use some of his methods as I identify conditions that will help my students continue to succeed. And then also in the same way help identify things that just aren't really working. That way I can discontinue them I would also use some of his practices to kind of keep a record of, long term, what led to the highest rate of success. And then also just reminding myself to constantly look for new ways to make my curriculum better, to make my students better, make myself a better teacher. Some of his major criticisms in his book in 2009, there was a major error in which some of the formulas used were not quite correct. They didn't affect the information so much as it was still accurate. However, many other researchers believed it was kind of skewed, a little bit less accurate than what he was leading us to believe. He does focus very highly on academic results, and many would argue that school is not just about the result of our test scores, that we should be trying to make stand-up human beings, etc., things like that. Also just that he relies on meta-analysis, other people's data, other studies, things like that. You tend to run the risk of having poor quality research and sometimes skewed research in those instances. However, I think predominantly most people like using his findings as kind of the starting point, the building block on which you might start structuring your classroom. So even though he does have some errors, some kind of unclear directions, you can't use his theory as like a one-size-fits-all, but you can use it to track positives in a classroom and kind of understand what does work long-term. Here are my references. Thank you so much. Again, he was John Hattie, and he's still going.